Is there a place and time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere at some time along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable.
Makeshift Stories presents Episode 290, Dead Zone, read by Kathleen Connolly. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime, escaping might turn out to be both the best and worst choice.
Mary shielded her eyes from the glare of the setting sun, her breath forming small clouds of condensation in the crisp autumn air. All the leaves on the scraggly, stunted trees had turned yellow, many already on the ground, creating a random pattern of bright color over the industrial fill. The genetically altered aspens had been designed to thrive in the heavy metal-laden soils of the reclamation zone. But to Mary, they looked tortured, as if they were barely hanging on, doing anything but thriving. Mixed in were a few brave native spruce, standing as a testament to the great boreal forest which had once covered the landscape. She had several theories on how they got there. The spruce seeds had been liberated by fires further north and had randomly blown in on the wind. Or, her favorite, the spindly evergreens were the rear guard of the ancient forest, standing in defiance of the human intervention. Mary turned away from the setting sun to watch its waning beams bounce off the sterile near-mirror surface of Dead Lake. That was her name for the southwest tailings pond, and if she ignored the odd straight bit of shoreline, she could almost picture it being a natural feature, albeit one that harbored no life. The 50-meter-high berm was the highest point in the zone, but she wasn't there to enjoy the view. Loki, her lead dog, hadn't returned on time, and she wanted to find him before it got dark. "Loki! Loki, come!" Mary called hopefully, scanning the horizon, finger-pressing the emergency recall button of a remote. She caught the glint of something metallic in the long shadows at the base of the berm and scrambled down the steep side. After nearly 50 years, nothing much had managed to grow on it. She almost fell several times, scraping her hands on the sharp rocks to keep her balance. It took nearly 5 minutes to thread her way down to where the crushed rock butted up against the struggling trees. Loki was lying on its side near the base of a scrubby aspen. 2 legs were broken, and there was a significant dent along its back. The thick branch that had made the dent lay abandoned nearby. "Oh, Loki, what's happened to you?" The dogbot tried to raise its head, and a tear rolled down Mary's cheek. Loki had been with her since she had become the custodian and was the last dogbot of its generation still operating. She preferred the older dogs. Their learning algorithms made them behave more like their biological analogs. Mary had invested countless hours training Loki to lead the pack and keep her company during the long, dark winters. She removed her rucksack, assembled a makeshift travois from aluminum hiking poles, then carefully rolled Loki onto it and lashed the dogbot down, its power levels too low to protest. A whiff of smoke suddenly caught Mary's attention, her muscles tensing. She stood up and sniffed the air, slowly turning to locate the source. Mary almost missed the thin trail of smoke wisping up from an unusually dense cluster of aspen about half a click away. She watched it for a few minutes, and when it didn't appear to be growing, she began to relax. A campfire? Mary was the only person in the area, other than the ragtag collection of misfits that had taken over the former town site at Fort McMurray, 40 kilometers away. No one ever came out to the reclamation zone. Given the toxicity, few dared to risk it. Concerned and curious, she picked up the travois and dragged it toward the thin column of smoke. It took nearly 10 minutes to make her way over the rough ground to the aspen grove. Mary put the travois down carefully. "I'll be back for you." She reassured the bot and then crept into the trees. Near the middle, a splash of lime green amongst the yellow leaves caught her attention. Mary crept through the undergrowth until she discovered a small campsite with an older man dressed in Camperstown camo, tending a small fire. Behind him, a lime green pup tent negated the effect of the camo gear. Mary hesitated. With migrating geese, you could wave your arms or shoot off one of the noise cannons to scare them away from Dead Lake. Deer and bears the dogs would chase off. A human? How to warn off a human? Had it been so long that she had forgotten? Mary jumped out of her hiding place, waved her arms and yelled, "Out! Out!" The tactic had always worked for birds. The man jerked up, tripped on his pack, and landed hard on his back. Mary charged, remembering just before she reached him that there was more to dealing with a human than scaring it. She stopped and planted her feet, hands on hips. The pitiful thing was cowering. Then she remembered. In an instant, all the long-discarded words and procedures flooded back. "Can't you read the signs?" Her voice was scratchy from disuse. "This is a restricted area. You're risking your life being here. That water?" She nodded at a small pot of water heating over the fire. "Did you get that at the lake?" The man nervously glanced at the pot like a guilty dog. "No amount of boiling will get rid of the arsenic, lead, and mercury." "Are you crazy? Do you have a death wish?" Recovering, the older man struggled to his feet, looking her up and down. "You're not corporate security," he noted more to himself than Mary. "I thought they had found me. They had a four-legged bot following me. I had to disable the thing." "Loki?" Mary gasped. "How would I know what it was called? It looked old and mean." "So you're the one who whacked my dog," Mary accused, stepping closer, balling her hands into fists. "Hey, it's just a bot. I couldn't afford to let it check in with corporate." "Corporate security? In a place like this?" Mary scoffed. "No one comes here unless they want to drop off the map. It's the end of the road, and Loki's not a bot. He's a friend who's more reliable than any human. He wouldn't have hurt you. His brain uses border collie engrams. Loki would have just herded you off the site for your own good. Like me, the only things that live here long-term are modded to tolerate the toxins." I thought it was a tracker," the man stammered. "Tracker? Corporate uses drones, not dogs, you idiot. What are you doing here?" I'm headed to Fort Smith." "The border? There's no road up there." "I know, I'm going by river." The man patted a rucksack containing an inflatable raft. "Are you crazy?" "It's the only unmonitored place you can sneak across the 60th parallel," the older man explained. "I intend to claim asylum. Even if you survive the trip, they'll just send you back. The Arctic Alliance doesn't want to make waves with the Great Plains Economic Zone." "They'll let me in," the man claimed confidently. "I've got something to trade. A gene mod to cure Alzheimer's. I'm a geneticist, worked for Advanced Global Health Systems. I was in the process of open sourcing the cure when Global's corporate security showed up to stop me. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life locked up in some isolated desert research campus, so I ran. And you picked the most obscure route you could find, through the reclamation zone, down the Athabasca River, across the Big Lake, then onto the Slave River. Not an easy trip. You must be extremely desperate or crazy." "Desperate," the man confirmed. "You're the first person to come over the fence in almost 3 decades, Mary said. "What's your name?" "Ethan, Dr. Ethan Tremblay." "Well, Doc, I'm Mary, the reclamation land's custodian, and you're trespassing. Didn't you see the signs and the razor wire?" Ethan shrugged. "This is the only way to get to the river. Didn't expect to meet anyone except patrol bots and security sensors. You said you've been here for 30 years, and you've been modded, which implies—" "I can't leave. I need the contaminants to keep healthy. The gene mod was a mandatory condition of my, arrangement. I like to think of it as job security. I'll tell you what, you help me fix Loki, and you can stay for a few days. You should be okay if you don't drink the water or eat anything that grows here. I could use the company for a change. I don't get out much. Also, you should put that fire out if you're trying to hide. I know I said corporate doesn't usually come out this far, but you don't want the whole district to know you're here. Now pack up and come with me back to my station. As part of your penance, you're going to help carry Loki there." "Beep, beep, beep." Mary looked back at her disabled dog strapped to the travoy. One eye was pulsating. "Drone!" she yelled, pulled an old thermal insulation sheet from her pack, then pushed Ethan to the ground, throwing the silver blanket over him. "Stay down. Don't move." "Why?" "And don't say anything until I tell you it's okay." Mary dropped the travois down beside the silver blanket and scanned the sky. At first, it was just an insectile speck buzzing the treetops. Then it turned and made a beeline straight toward her. The drone covered the distance in a few seconds, abruptly coming to a hover a few meters over Mary's head. The thing was about a meter from fan tip to fan tip, matte black, and sported a Synth Bio Investigations logo. The menacing machine lingered, its controller at the other end making up their mind. Then it flew off in the direction it had come from. Mary waited until she was sure it wasn't coming back, then pulled the thermal sheet off Ethan. "Why did it miss the blanket?" he questioned, getting up off the ground. "It didn't. It was scouting for human-sized heat signatures. The blanket was at ambient temperature. Well, 2 firsts in one day. You, then a corporate tracker drone? Come on, let's get going before they come back." The station was a rusting mobile office module salvaged from one of the old mine sites. Long ago, its paint had given in to the elements, leaving a patchwork of exposed corrugated aluminum, rust ringing each rivet holding the structure together. Bits and pieces of recycled mining equipment were huddled under sun-bleached blue tarps scattered around the clearing. 3 shipping containers stacked end on end and held in place by steel cables served as her fire lookout. The dogs, all except Loki, had plugged themselves into the batteries she had wired to the solar panel farm. They swiveled their heads in unison to watch her and the stranger walk out of the trees. They were networked and probably already knew the sorry state Loki was in. Mary dragged the travois to the only other structure in her camp, a rusting shipping container that served as her workshop. "Come help me get Loki onto the bench." Exhausted, Ethan dropped his heavy packs on the ground. "Take your stuff inside and bury it under a pile of junk," she directed. "Custodians don't have shiny new gear sporting price tags." Mary reached out and plucked off an orange tag. "When the corporates show up, and sooner or later they will, I don't want any of your stuff out in the open. Now help me get Loki on the bench." She undid the straps holding the dogbot to the travois. "Come here and take the back end." "Ugh, this thing's heavier than it looks," Ethan grunted, struggling to lift the machine. "If you're having trouble lifting a dog, how do you expect to raft nearly 500 kilometers downriver to the 60th parallel?" "It's with the current. I'll drift most of the way." "And the rapids? Do you have any experience navigating white water?" "I intend to walk around the hard spots. I have them all marked on my GPS. I did my research." "Watching an online video and doing it are 2 different things," Mary dismissed. "And it's already September and getting cold. If you help me, we can get Loki fixed in a day. Then you better get going. However, if you value your life, you should turn around and find another way." Mary was surprised by her concern. After all the years with only the dogs for friends, she hadn't expected to be able to empathize with another human. And had she been as naive about wilderness survival when she first arrived at the reclamation? Maybe. But she had also been 30 years younger than the doc. Mary couldn't imagine a 60-something-year-old who had spent his life behind a lab desk rafting alone down the Athabasca River at the start of fall. "Here, take this hex wrench and pull out all the bolts on Loki's back hind," she directed. Ethan grasped the greasy tool with 2 fingers, trying to avoid getting his hands dirty. He examined its end, and then the robot dog. "I'd rather use my own." He pulled out a brand new multi-tool, selected a wrench, and went to work. "Don't like getting dirty? Well, you gotta get used to doing what it takes to fix stuff if you're going to survive out here." Ethan experimentally inserted the tool into a bolt head and twisted, first tightening instead of loosening the bolt. "Careful," Mary warned. "If you over-torque a bolt, you can break it. I only have so many spare parts and I need every dog. They're my arms, legs, and eyes. They each have their area to patrol. If they find a deer trying to eat the local flora, they chase them out. That's all that Loki was doing, chasing you off when you attacked him." She finished loosening the dented backplate and pulled it off. "How did you end up here?" Ethan asked, pausing to drop a bolt into an old can he had found. Mary placed the dented carapace on an ancient motor block she used for an anvil. "My employer accused me of industrial treason, leaking trade secrets, which in the Great Plains Economic Zone is a capital offense. A colleague, another roboticist, set me up so he could get promoted, but I had no way to prove it." "And you can't leave, so it's just a bigger prison cell," Mary smiled wanly. "It was this place versus going to trial and losing. Hey, once you get those bolts out, we'll call it a day." Mary hadn't slept well and was up at sunrise. Deciding Ethan would need all the rest he could get, she went to dust off the solar cells. It was always a good practice to squeeze as many watts as possible out of them to heat the underground aquifer before the sun got too low in the fall sky. The crisp morning air bit through her light jacket, making Mary shiver. She considered going back for something heavier, but decided against it, not wanting to risk waking Ethan. Having a living, breathing human around made her feel uneasy. It exposed her to what she had missed over the last 30 years. As the old saying goes, let sleeping dogs lie. Mary didn't want to wake that part of her that yearned for companionship. Last night, she and the doc had spent several hours talking. He turned out to be a decent human, someone she could imagine herself spending time with. However, there was the insane trip Ethan had planned. He'd probably never make it. His inflatable raft was a toy that'd get ripped apart on the first sharp rock it hit. Should she tell him about the boat reclamation kept for testing downstream river water? Should she try to talk him out of his mad dash for the border? And do what? Give himself up or stay with her and die from heavy metal poisoning? The dogs, resting on their sides near the solar farm, drowsy with a full charge, suddenly sat up, ears all swiveling in the same direction. Mary glanced nervously back at the trailer. "Don't wake him up. Don't let him come out," she urged the universe, then turned to face where the dogs were looking. It was the drone from the day before. It hesitated at the edge of the clearing, spotted Mary in the solar panel garden, and headed her way. Mary took a deep breath, glanced nervously at her trailer again, and then waved, beckoning the machine over. This time it stopped at eye level, fans buzzing, its camera pointed straight at her. "Mary Power, Reclamation Custodian," a tinny female voice stated from a small speaker. "Field Agent Carmen Lopez, Synth Bio Investigations. We're looking for a fugitive, an older man, possibly dangerous, who may have fled this direction. Have you or your robot seen him, or any sign that he may have passed through here recently?" Mary struggled to remain calm. Resisting the urge to glance back at the office module door, she steadied her voice. "No, Agent Lopez, unless you're interested in deer or coyotes. My dogs and I have seen nothing. The guy you're pursuing would have to be crazy to attempt to cross the reclamation to get to the river." "The river," Lopez repeated. Interesting assumption. Mary realized she may have slipped up. "But you've seen no one, not even signs of a campsite or campfire?" Lopez persisted. Mary shook her head. The drone hovered, fans whirring menacingly for a moment before slowly turning to take in the entire site. Then it flew off in the general direction to where Mary had first found Ethan. They knew. As soon as the drone disappeared behind the trees, Mary dropped the cleaning gear on the ground and ran to wake Ethan. "Get up!" "What?" "They know you're here. There was another drone. It just left. An agent named Lopez used it to ask me if I had seen you. I don't think she believed me. They'll come back in person now and search my station. You gotta hide." Mary felt the air pump against her eardrums well before the whoop, whoop, whoop resounded across the sky. A large VTOL flying so low that its undercarriage was ripping leaves from the treetops streaked in. A blizzard of dust kicked up by the downwash obscured the flying metal predator as it settled into the only open space that would accommodate it, barely. The engines began to spin down, then a side door fell open. Private security guards in dark blue hazmat suits spilled onto the ground and began to fan out. A trim woman wearing data glasses and orange PPE followed behind them, looked around, spotted Mary, then made a beeline toward her, waving a document. "We've got a search warrant," she yelled. Mary shrugged. "The PPE gear isn't necessary for a short visit. Oh, and you didn't need a warrant. You could have just asked." "We don't take chances, custodian power. I assume you'll have no problem if we start in that container over there." Agent Lopez pointed to the workshop. "Go ahead, start wherever you want." Mary followed Lopez and 2 security guards to the shipping container, but the dogs, anxious about the strangers, moved to block their way. Lopez glared at Mary. "Stand down," Mary ordered. The dogs obediently sat but kept their sensors trained on the group of strangers as they opened the end of the container and peered in. While the guards poked through drawers and piles of recycled parts, Lopez examined Loki lying on the workbench, still partly disassembled. "Looks like someone took a club to it," she noted. "Its name is Loki, and he was injured chasing off a bear. Must have had deformed paws. No claw marks," Lopez noted, picking up Loki's dented carapace, turning it over. "Intergenerational exposure causes unexpected genetic changes," Mary explained. "The dogs and I try our best to keep animals out of the contaminated areas. I was going to hammer that out this morning, provided your search doesn't take all day." Mary grabbed the metal cover from Lopez, noticing Ethan's multi-tool lying on the table. Lopez followed her eyes to it. "Ah, something new. I was beginning to think everything here was decades old, like that Spot version 9 on the table. Must be hard living here on your own." "The dogs are all the company I need," Mary insisted. No visitors recently?" Lopez picked up the multi-tool. "Who might have forgotten this?" "I get drone deliveries. That came on the last one. No one comes out here. Everyone knows the risks of repeated exposure." Lopez's doubtful eyes met Mary's. The woman thoughtfully placed the multi-tool back on the bench. "You know, there's a bonus for finding Ethan Tremblay, one of the largest in recent memory. I've read your file. It's enough to buy any genetic mod on the market, or," she added, "reverse an existing one. We'll be at the old heliport on the river, just outside the reclamation for a few more days. If you see him or find evidence that he's in the area, come see me." Lopez turned away from the bench. "Okay, people, we're not going to find anything here. Let's go." Mary watched the big VTOL climb into the sky, rotate, and head southeast toward the river. "Okay, they're gone," she called out. Several logs fell off a pile of rotting timber near the edge of the clearing, revealing a silver human-sized bundle. Ethan struggled out of the thermal blanket Mary had insisted he wrap in to avoid the IR sensors, then jumped to the ground, nervously checking the sky. "I should leave." Mary nodded. "Agreed, but first you're going to help me fix Loki." She replaced parts while Ethan pounded out the dent he had put in the dog's back. By noon, Loki was sitting on its haunches, patiently waiting for instructions. The dog had trained all its sensors on Mary. Was she being that obvious? Could Loki sense what she was about to do? The dogbot had been new when she started the job, and it had watched her mannerisms for 30 years. Perhaps that was why Loki understood her better than any human did. How would the machine react to a new person taking over? Would another custodian even appreciate the subtle differences between Loki and a stock robotic patrol dog? Loki wagged its mechanical tail when she smiled at it. Mary had added the tail while she was waiting out a blizzard one winter, and she had made a lot of other unnecessary customizations over the years. "I'm ready." Ethan lumbered out of the tool shed, weighted down by his packs. "Give me your GPS navigator," Mary demanded. "I'll mark the spot on your map where launching a raft is easiest. It's an old heliport beside the river." She hesitated, then touched the small screen. "There, done. Loki and I will come as far as the old settling pond overflow outlet. From there, it should be an easy walk to the heliport." "Thanks for coming, but I'm sure I could find it on my own," Ethan assured before heading off in the wrong direction. "This way," Mary corrected. She was doing him a favor, turning him in. Ethan would never survive the trip. They walked silently toward the berm, holding back Dead Lake until Ethan wanted to stop to adjust his packs. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Mary asked. "You could turn back. There's pretty much nothing between here and Fort Smith, and that's a lot of opportunities to die is what you're trying to say," Ethan added, adjusting his straps. "I know that. Look, I have a close, lifelong friend who was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's. If I stay here or let myself be caught, they'll never be able to afford my gene mod cure. Global intends to sell it at a premium to select clients. It's worth billions to the company as long as they can stop me from getting to the Arctic Alliance, where genetic modifications are public domain. I've sealed all my research in a floating waterproof container with a locator beacon. It's all downstream to the 60th parallel. I ran multiple computer simulations. If I don't make it, someone in the Alliance will eventually find my work before it ends up in the Arctic Ocean. I will succeed. I owe that to my friend." In silence, Mary helped Ethan with the final adjustments to his packs, while Loki sat patiently waiting, enthusiastically wagging the tail Mary had made for it. She smiled at the bot and decided she could never allow Loki to be scrapped. She owed that to her old companion. "This is where we part company," she announced an hour later. They were standing on a berm, which prevented Dead Lake from draining into the Athabasca River. Loki sat and leaned against her legs. "Okay," Mary sighed after a minute of tense silence. "Ethan, I need your GPS tracker again." Ethan handed over the device. Mary switched it on and scanned the riverbank in both directions as if trying to find something. "It's been a long time since I was here. Things have changed. I don't think the helipad is still there. I should have been able to see it from here." "There's another place, a better place to launch further downstream. It's where the reclamation keeps its water sampling boat. You'll find a shed there with the boat, clothing, and supplies. Better stuff than you've got. Here's the key. Do me a favor and make it look like you've broken in. Bury that Camperstown crap and use Reclamation's gear. If anyone spots you on the river, they'll think you're working for them. Now go." "But..." "Go, shoot, before I change my mind." Mary and Loki stayed until sunset, watching the river flow silently on its way to the Arctic Ocean. "Come on, Loki. Let's go see what your pals were up to today. Tomorrow we'll head over to the helipad and tell them we saw a man at the fence turn around and head back south." Loki wagged its tail and got up to follow.
You can help us create original content twice a month by heading over to ko-fi.com/makeshiftstories and making a one-time donation, or becoming an ongoing supporter at patreon.com/makeshiftstories. And if you can, please leave us a review or rating wherever you're listening to the podcast. It helps new listeners discover us. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. Makeshift Stories is released around the beginning and middle of the month. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Kathleen Connolly. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. Audio production and editing by Vicata Studios. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial. Attribution, no derivative license.